Well, hello everyone. This is Geoff Perlman with Xojo. Welcome to Migrating from FileMaker to Xojo. I'm here with my co-host Tim Dietrich, who is a Xojo user. Say hello, Tim.
Hi, everyone.
And let's jump right in. Okay, so we're going to be recording, or we are recording this, and it'll be up on YouTube. So if you want to watch it again, you'll be able to watch it on our YouTube channel. If you want to send it to other people, you can do that as well. But it'll be up on YouTube either later today or tomorrow. If you have questions, there's a questions panel in Zoom, so go ahead and enter them there. And at the end, we'll have some time for questions. So just put them all in there, and Tim and I will be answering them when we get towards the end. If we stop every time to answer them as we go, this will take twice as long. So put them in there, and we'll answer them at the end. Again, I'm Geoff Perlman. I'm the founder and CEO of Xojo. I began using FileMaker in 1986 when it was published by Neshoba Systems out of Florida before it was even part of Claris. So it's been a while. I haven't been using it lately, I will admit that, but I did use it for quite a long time. I worked with 4D, which is another relational database development tool for many, many years. And I worked at 4D actually for about 4 years in the early 1990s. I'm a lover of tools that make software development easier. And again, I'm the founder and CEO of Xojo, and I've been doing that since 1996. Tim is a longtime user of FileMaker. He's well known in the FileMaker community. He's a longtime user of Xojo. He's also a longtime user of NetSuite, so he's really into the database stuff. And like me, he's a lover of tools that make software development easier. So he's my co-host, and he'll be chiming in throughout this presentation. Now, this year we're doing something we've done before called the Year of Code. This is just something I want to mention. It's kind of a fun activity. It helps people that are new to Xojo learn faster. It helps experienced users learn new skills. Of course, if you don't have fun, what's the point? We have a theme every month, and what you do is you build an app using Xojo with that theme, and it runs through November. We'll have winners. Yes, we'll have winners announced in December, which means we'll have prizes, which is great. And you can find more about that on our website or our blog, to be specific. So if you're interested, check that out. That's a lot of fun. All right, what are we going to cover? Well, we're going to cover Xojo licensing, what platforms we support. We're going to talk about FileMaker's pain points that you're having and how Xojo relieves that pain. Talk about how to learn the basics of Xojo. You're going to need to choose a database engine. Presumably, you won't be using FileMaker. We'll talk about plugins in case you're using plugins in Xojo, or rather in FileMaker, and how you'll use them in Xojo. What do you do to access a database in Xojo? What about recreating the forms if you're going to be migrating an existing FileMaker application over to Xojo? You'll need to recreate your forms. What about porting code, your scripts and such? Talk about reporting, debugging, building your app, because Xojo builds standalone apps, and what some next steps might be. So that's all the stuff we're going to be covering in this webinar. We're going to do it as productively as we can. All right, let's talk about licensing. So Xojo is a developer license. There's no runtime license. You're buying a license yourself for you to build apps. There's nothing that your end users need to buy. You can build as many apps as you want, as often as you want. There's no limits there. When you buy a license for Xojo, you get 12 months of updates. And when your license expires, you can then renew if you want to continue to get those updates, to get existing, or future updates rather. Now, if you don't renew, you can still use the versions of Xojo that were released while your license was active. So think of it like a magazine subscription. If you stop subscribing to the magazine, the issues that you already had don't vanish into thin air. You still have them. Well, we work the same way with Xojo. Now, what platforms do we support? Well, you can run the Xojo IDE on Linux, which includes Raspberry Pi, Mac OS, and Windows. We support both ARM and x86 processors. Desktop apps can run on Linux, Mac OS, and ARM, and you'll see that that little asterisk is for Raspberry Pi. We include Raspberry Pi as well as standard Linux distributions. Web applications that you build, Linux, Mac OS, and Windows, no surprise there. Mobile applications, we support Android, notice that's in bold, and iOS and iPad OS. And console apps for Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. Now, you might not know what a console app is. A console app is basically an application that doesn't have any user interface at all. So it might be something that you have on a server that runs regularly. It might be some background task. Um, Often they're server-based applications, but just think of it as an application that doesn't have any user interface. It can run just once and do a job, or you could have it, like as a cron job on a server where it runs periodically. So that's another kind of app you can build with Xojo. Basically, any kind of app you're likely to want to be able to build, you can build with Xojo. Now, let's talk about FileMaker's pain points and what Xojo does to relieve those pain points. So first of all, of course, licensing. FileMaker is a per user license, which can make it expensive. Xojo's per developer license, which makes it quite affordable. What about building native standalone apps? Well, FileMaker doesn't really build native standalone apps, but Xojo does. The code that you write, or the applications you build, are compiled down to machine code. It's a app no different than an app built in traditional tools like Xcode or Visual Studio, that sort of thing. You get a compiled application, which also, of course, means you get compiled performance as well. And if you're going to sell something to other people, it means that your source code is protected because they can't get to anything. They just use the app you build. Mobile. FileMaker has some mobile support. Their iOS support's not great, but it is there. They don't have any Android support. Xojo has very strong iOS and Android support. For the web, FileMaker's support for the web is kind of weak. We have great web support. In fact, everything you learn about Xojo, 95% of it is going to be applicable whether you're building a desktop app, a web app, a mobile app, or console app. You're going to use the same development tool, the same language, the same layout editor. It's all the same experience for you. So a lot of our users start because they want to build a desktop app or a mobile app or a web app, and then they find themselves realizing, hey, I actually now have the skills to build these other types of apps that I didn't initially plan for. So that's a great benefit of learning Xojo. And expandability. FileMaker is just for databases. Xojo, you can really build virtually anything you can imagine. And I'm going to show you some examples to show you the depth and breadth of what can be built in Xojo beyond just databases. Programmability. FileMaker has scripting, which compared to Xojo is kind of weak. We have a strong, modern, compiled language, but don't fret if you haven't done programming before. Xojo is a great place to start. We have a lot of users that never wrote a line of code in their lives and started with Xojo, and some of those people are now full-time professional developers. It's a very simple dot syntax, much like JavaScript, so think of it that way, and we'll see a little bit of that later. Okay, how do you learn the basics? Well, we have in our documentation, we have desktop, web, and mobile quick starts. These take you maybe 10 minutes to do. So it just gives you a kind of a what's your appetite for what it's like to work in building a desktop, web, or mobile application. We also have tutorials for all of these as well. Those are longer. They might take you a half an hour to 45 minutes and they go into more depth. We have over 300 example projects. So chances are if you're wanting to do something, there's a good chance that there's already an example project that would get you started. And we have over 2,700 pages of documentation. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to have to read all that, but there's a lot of documentation so that when you need more information about something specific, it'll be there for you. And again, we build completely standalone applications that are compiled to machine code. There's no interpreter. It's a native application, and the user interfaces are native as well, which means that as operating systems add new features, your application in many cases is just going to get those new features for free. Like when they change the user interface, for example, we're using native controls, so the user interface will automatically adapt to changes made by the operating system. Like with Apple's got their new liquid glass thing coming up, right? And they're changing Mac OS as well. So our applications will just automatically adapt to that. And as I've said, it's not just for database applications. You can build virtually anything you can imagine. Now, I recommend when you're trying to learn, start with a small exploratory project. I think back to quite a long time ago when I first tried 3D I think it was like on an Apple II, and my first 3D model was just a cube, which is like 8 points, and my second was a Klingon battle cruiser, which was like 300 and something points. So pick something really small. Don't go for the really huge thing first. Just pick a tiny little project that has something to do with something you're interested in, because when you've got a goal, that really makes a huge difference in terms of learning. Now, choosing a database engine. Chances are you're not going to be using FileMaker. So if it's a single user app, you'll probably want to use SQLite, and we have built-in support for SQLite. If it's multi-user, you're probably going to use MySQL or Postgres. If you can't, if you have a client, for example, and they're using Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server or something else, as long as there's an ODBC driver, you can access it that way as well. And the great thing about these is that, again, like better than 95% of what you do is going to be the same, whether it's SQLite, MySQL, Postgres, doesn't matter, because we provide a standard kind of abstraction layer from all that. So once you learn how to do one, you're well on your way to using the rest of them. And there's no limits on database connections. In other words, you could have an application that talks to a SQLite database locally, but also has a connection to a MySQL database and a PostgreSQL database and talks to something else through ODBC. There's really no limits at all to the number of databases and the number of different types of databases that any one Xojo application can talk to. It's pretty wide open.
Hey, Jeff,
Okay. Oh
before
yeah,
you move on from that slide, can you go back for just a second?
sure.
So I was going to say that, um, those are options that you have if you want to choose a different database engine, but it is possible to build Xojo-based apps, whether it's desktop, web, or mobile, that do connect to FileMaker if you want to do that. As long as you're running FileMaker on a server, you could use web APIs, FileMaker's APIs to do that.
No, that's a
So
good point.
if your goal is to build like a real iOS app or an Android app with FileMaker on the back end, it is possible to do that. So keep that in mind. I think that was one of the very first things I did when I made the switch from FileMaker to Xojo. So,
That's a good point. And you'd go through like a REST API there, Tim?
yep.
Yeah, and so Xojo has a class called URL connection, and you can just give it URLs, and it will, as the name sounds, as the name implies, it will connect and it'll send the URL, and then you'll get the data back, and you can fill it into the user interface. Yeah, you can totally do that. I should
Yeah.
have had that bullet point on these.
Yeah, I forgot about it too. I think we also have a couple of older webinars that show how to do that, along with the example projects to kind of help you get started on how to make those connections via the web API. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, plugins. So if you're using third-party plugins, or if some of your third-party plugins, there may be functionality you need that is a third-party plugin in Xojo. If you go to our documentation and go to resources and extras, you'll see a list of all the popular third-party plugins out there. If you're using Monkey Bread software plugins in FileMaker, I've got really good news for you because Monkey Bread is also the largest maker of plugins for Xojo. So many of the FileMaker plugins are also available as Xojo plugins. So there's a decent chance that you just get the Xojo version and you'd be off to the races. And if you've written plugins for FileMaker, We do have an SDK for porting those over to Xojo. Okay, I mentioned that Xojo's for more than just database applications. I want to show you a handful of them really quick, just so you can get some idea of all the different types of things you can make with Xojo. Um, this is an application I wrote myself for managing our documentation system. It's a desktop app, and I've got the all the files over there on the left-hand side that are in the documentation. And for example, that check links button that goes through all 2,700 pages of our documentation and checks every single link on every single page, and there are dozens of links per page. And it does the entire documentation system in, I think it's like 12 seconds. So I also can create new pages. That release day button is what we use on the day we release a new version of Xojo because it does a bunch of automated tasks. So anyway, this is an app that I wrote. Um, Now this is a neat one. So Michael Smith is a YouTuber. He has a channel called Nerdtronics. And he wrote an app in Xojo to control a wall-sized robot. And you can see it back there. It's that metal frame, right? And it's this robot that's being controlled by a Raspberry Pi device, which is that little display you can see sitting on the desk with all the colors on it in the middle of the picture. And you can see that what it's doing is it's drawing from the drawing that's on the computer. It's recreating that by it's holding a pen and it's doing all the drawing, which is pretty cool. And there's a close-up of the Raspberry Pi app. It's just got a bunch of, settings and stuff. And the final painting that it draws looks like that. In fact, I actually have this on my wall in my office here. He did 250 of these, and it's kind of standard, I guess, poster size. It was he was going to do a Roy Lichtenstein, but then he realized he might get into trouble, so he created his own drawing that looks like a Roy Lichtenstein drawing and recreate it. So it's pretty cool. And if you look in the lower right corner, it's the robot even signed it, Roy Bot, down there in the lower right corner. This is really cool. So this is a hardware solution. It's a Bluetooth device by Control Bionics. It's for ALS patients, people that are locked in. You stick that to wherever you have a muscle that you can move, and then you learn to flex the muscle to control a cursor that allows you to navigate a screen. And this is the software written in Xojo, where you can essentially build a sentence to be able to communicate. And they told me that when they did their prototype, their first patient was a Japanese patient who was completely locked in. He could only move one muscle above his, I don't know, left or right eyebrow. And within 45 minutes, he was able to start texting people in Japanese, which was really, really cool. So that's another application that in part is written in Xojo. Light Blue Software is a company that makes software for professional photographers to help them manage their business. This is their desktop application, which handles shoots and contacts, does quotes, purchases, payments, etc. It's the whole ball of wax for professional photographers. Um, they've also got an iOS version written in Xojo. So there's the iOS version, and they have an Android version in Xojo. So they're doing desktop, iOS, and Android all in Xojo. Here's another really cool app. So one of our users is Dr. Thomas Moore. He is a physics professor at Pomona College in California, and he is working with NASA on the Laser Interferometer Space Antenna mission. And he's built a database application that does it'll be doing analysis of the data coming back from this mission. Um, the user interface for the app itself isn't that interesting, but I've got a cool video here that shows it's the LISA mission is going to be three probes that will be following the Earth. You can see them there. It's 1.6 million miles on a side. And what it's going to do is it's going to detect gravitational waves as they move through the solar system. So these probes will send their data back to Earth, and this desktop application will analyze the data, which is pretty cool. Sound and Sync is they make award-winning professional sound editing software, and this is Mark Franken. He is the founder. He's an Academy Award-winning sound editor. In fact, he worked on Lord of the Rings. That was it's one of my favorite trilogies. And it's interesting how he ended up in the software business. He started writing sound editing software for his own use and in his job. And after a while, he realized he could sell it to other sound editors. And now that's all he does. He's not actually a sound editor anymore. Now he actually just creates sound editing software and sells it to other people. In fact, he won a Technical Academy Award for one of his apps. I'm gonna go through these really quick. This is one called Eddie Q for cues. Eddie Prompt. It's all sound editing terminology, so I don't know exactly what it does. Eddie Load and Eddie Chart. Oh, and Eddie Marker for marking different places, right in a film. And of course, Xojo itself is written in Xojo. We write not only the whole Xojo IDE in Xojo, but the entire web framework is written in Xojo. A lot of the Android framework. We write as much of Xojo in Xojo as we possibly can. So you can do a lot with Xojo other than just build database applications. All right, so let's talk about accessing a database via code. Now, in FileMaker, you don't tend to do that, but I'm going to show you a little bit, and then I'm going to show you how you can do it without code in Xojo. But I want you to just have sort of an idea of how to do it in code if you need to. Well, of course, you're going to have layouts. You're going to create a layout, a window, a web page, or a mobile screen, or several of them. Then you use a database connection object to connect to your database. Now that's something you just add to your project from a menu and you pick which database you want to connect to, and that object is what you use to connect. And then you might write code to query the database, get the data, and put it into the user interface. This is if you're doing it, kind of old school manually. Now, this isn't complicated. I'll show you a little bit of code in a second. It's not complicated, but it's grunt work. And for example, so here's some code, and again, I'm just going to explain this really quick. We're making a variable at the top called rows. A row set is just a collection of rows. And then we're doing a SQL call, a query, select basically all, select star from customers. That's going to select all of the rows from customers, put in that row set. And then it's checking to see if the row count is 0. If it is, there's no customers. So it's doing a beep and then displaying an alert box, message box, no customers found. Otherwise, there was more than 0 customers. So this is going through a loop for each row as a database row in that rows, the list of all the rows, and it's getting the phone number out of each one and putting it in a variable called phone number, and then just adding it as a row to a pop-up menu called phone pop-up. So it just loops through them all, puts all the phone numbers into a pop-up menu. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of some code. Now, the good news is you don't even have to do this. You can access a database without any code, and that's with using something called DBKit. So DBKit is something that you add to your Xojo project. You just copy and paste it right in. In fact, we ship it as an example, and it provides drag and drop database access similar to FileMaker. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. It handles getting all the data in and out of the user interface without you having to write code, just as you're used to in FileMaker. It also just provides a lot of the functionality you need in a database app. And it's provided free with Xojo. Again, it ships as an example. And it works with single and multi-user applications. And of course, desktop and web applications. Now, it doesn't currently work with mobile, but we do have a mobile version in the works. And it will work the same way, but currently it supports desktop and web. Again, the mobile version of DBKit is coming. Okay, so let's do a demo. All right. So let's see here. Let me get back. Okay. All right. So here I've got a new Xojo app, and I've already copied in DBKit and its icons. So those are there now. But again, you can just get those out of the example project. When you start a project in Xojo, you can choose to make it a desktop project, a web project, console, iOS, or Android. But again, the way you do it and the code you write is mostly going to be the same, regardless of what kind of project you do. I'm gonna be showing you a desktop project in this case. Okay, so to give you a quick idea of, you've got a window and you can add as many windows as you want. Over here on the side, there's an inspector. Tim, does FileMaker have an inspector like this? It's been a while since I've used FileMaker.
Yeah, it does. Very
Okay.
similar. Yep.
Okay, so up here you've got the buttons for the inspector and for the library. If you click over to the library, you've got a bunch of controls. You just drag things onto your window. So for example, um, I'm gonna show you something that's already well, actually, let's just build something. All right, so I'm gonna build a user interface that displays customers because I've got a customers database. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a database connection. So I'm going to go database connection, and there's the different databases we support. I'm going to choose SQLite. So that creates this object, and I'm going to pick the SQLite database that I want to use. This is the Eddie's Electronics database that we use for a lot of our demos. Okay, and now I've got that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is start building the user interface. And I want to be able to search and have a list of customers and then do some editing. So I'm going to grab a search field. Drag that out here. And I'm going to grab a list box. Basically, I'm going to build just a little bit of the interface first. Okay, and let's see. Let me configure the list box a little bit. So I want this to be 2 columns, and I want the header to be first name, last name. Okay. All right. On here, let's change the title of the window to customers. All right. All right, so now, as I said, Xojo's for building all kinds of stuff, not just database applications. So what DBKit is DBKit is like an extra set of controls and such that are designed to work specifically with databases. So if I want this window to be a database window, to be a DBKit window, I can just click and choose DBKit window. And I'm going to do the same with search, make it a DBKit search field, and the list box. DBKit list box. Okay. What that does is it adds some extra functionality to these controls. Now, they still look exactly the same and pretty much behave the same way, but now they've got some extra functionality. For example, if I click on the window, I can scroll down and there's now this DBKit section. And I'm going to pick the database that I want to use. So, in fact, let's change this to Eddie's. That will just be the name we're going to use since it's connected to the Eddie's Electronics database. And under here, I've got database, and I can just pick the database. And we only have one connection in this project, so I'm going to pick Eddie's, and I'm going to tell it I want to use the customers table. Okay. Now, listbox, it now also has a DBKit section. So I'm going to tell it I want to use the customers table, and I'm going to tell it I want it to search first name and last name. You can even add columns that you don't display if you wanted to be able to search them. All right, so let's see. We haven't written any code yet. Let's see how this is working so far. So I'm going to press run. That's going to build the application and launch it. So you'll see the application is now running separately from Xojo, which is back here. And by default, the search field will just display all the rows if you don't do a search or don't provide a criteria. It even automatically puts that hint in there, search first name and last name. So now I can just start typing, and you can see it's searching for names that start with first name or last name start with what I've typed, NO in this case. And if I clear it, then it automatically goes back to the whole list. So great, we've got that working. So I'm going to click stop. We'll go back and let's do a little more. So I want to be able to edit whichever row I pick. So I'm going to go and grab from the library a field and we'll make this the first name field. I'm going to actually, hey, wait a minute. I'm going to set this as up as a DBKit field, DBKit text field. And now I'm going to duplicate it. This will be first name and last name. And let's have a line for the address. And let's get city and state. And we'll do zip code. Okay, so I've got some fields here, but next thing I need to do is tell it what's going to go in each field. So the good news is while you can for the fields, because they're DBKit controls, you can tell it which column name, you can tell if it's mandatory. You know, there's some options here. If you just name the control the name of the column, that will be enough. So I'm going to call this first name. I'm going to call this last name, address, city. I believe this is state or region. And then this is postal code, if I've done that right. Okay, hopefully I've done all those correct. And now let's just run and see what happens. And there it is. There's when I click, it fills all the fields in. I can do a search and it fills them in. And you'll see that these are read only. I can select, but I can't actually edit because we want the user to accidentally edit the record. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an edit button. I made this work the way like the Contacts app does in macOS, where you're normally in read-only mode, but to edit, you click an edit button. That puts you into edit mode, and then the edit button becomes a done button, which you click to exit edit mode. That way you're not accidentally editing data. Let's go add that. So I'm going to go to the library and I'm going to grab a button, put it down here, and I'm going to call it edit. And then I'm going to go to the inspector and change it from a regular button into a special kind of button, a DBKit edit button. So it is a regular button, but now it has some extra features to handle editing. So I'm going to press run. And now if I want to edit, I can just click the edit button. Notice the button becomes done. The fields are now enabled, and I can change the name, for example, press done. And not only does it change it and put it back out of edit mode, but you'll notice the list box automatically updated as well because that column happens to be displayed in the list box. So that's all handled automatically. Now let's add a delete button. So I'm going to go to the library, grab another button. I could have just duplicated the edit button, of course. Call this delete. And let's go to the inspector and change it to a DBKit delete button. And let's try that out. Okay, so I can select one, I can click delete, and this dialog box automatically comes up asking if the user wants to delete. If I click cancel, of course it doesn't delete. If I click continue, it deletes and selects the next row and loads it up. That's all automatic. Last but not least, let's add one more button. Let's add an undo button. Let's say we made some changes and decide we didn't want to keep them. So I'll call this undo. And let's go to the inspector and change it from a regular button to a undo button. Now you'll notice there are other types of buttons. There's a new button for making new rows, and there are buttons to move to the first row, last row, next row, and previous row. So you can make buttons for those too. And there's a whole bunch more controls in DBKit. I'm barely scratching the surface here. All right, so let's try out the undo button. Okay, now you notice the undo button is disabled. That's because I haven't made any changes yet. So let's pick a row and I'll click edit. And let's say I start changing this. And as soon as I start typing, the undo button enables because it knows the record is different. It's been changed. And if I realize, oh, you know what, I made a bunch of changes to this record. Maybe I changed this to Texas, for example. And if you press undo, then it loads the record back from disk the way it originally was, and the undo button is, of course, now disabled because the record isn't changed anymore and we're no longer in edit mode. So that's just a little bit, a little quick demo of what you can do with DBKit. As you can see, it's pretty much drag and drop. There's a whole lot of functionality. You can show related rows. I'll show you the other, the more complete version of this customers window in a minute. But there's a lot. There's pop-up menus that can be automatically loaded from other tables, etc. Okay, so this is the main DBKit demo project. This is the most recent version. This is not the shipping version that you've that's available right now, but this, like I said, this will be available in a little bit. And this is the same thing. In fact, I'll show you in a second how there's no code behind this. You click, it fills it in for you, pictures and all. You can even do things like, let me click edit. You see then the fields become editable. Notice that the pop-up menu here isn't a field, but or sorry, the state isn't a field, it's a pop-up menu. This is actually being loaded from a separate table, and that's all automatic. I'll show you that in a second when we go to look at the layout. Um, you can have number fields, like this is a number field, so it won't allow you to enter characters. You can have check boxes. There's a date picker. This is a number field as well, but it's formatted for current or for percentage. And like I said, you make a change, um, and if you click undo, then that undoes the change, and you can see it takes you out of edit mode because it reloaded the row. You can delete it. It does this for you, the confirmation. And if you're building applications that are going to be um, they're going to be localized into other languages. All of this is localizable. Everything that DBKit does and Xojo apps in general are really simple for localization. So you can include multiple languages in a single application. It also will show related data. So for example, this is showing a list of invoices. So you got an invoice number, you've got the first name and last name coming from the customers table, and you can see here I've got line items, and you can do the calculations and all that stuff, for line total, things like that. So yeah, pretty much everything you'd need it to do in a database. You can also, I've added some interesting search stuff built right into this. So for example, let's say you want all of the invoices where the amount is more than $1,000. If you just type amount, oops, hang on 1 second. There we go. Um, put the name of the column greater than 1,000, and there you go. You've got all of the invoices over $1,000. You can do it by invoice number. You can do date. You can do ranges. You can say, I want all the ones from $1,000 to $10,000, wherever you want. There's just this sort of shorthand that I've built into the search field. You can also do user interfaces where there's no list. Like this is the in this example, this is the DBKit example. Um, this has no list. There's just a selection that's already been done, and you just can go through the rows. So I'm trying to show the different kinds of database interfaces you might build. One thing I've noticed with FileMaker over the years is the FileMaker user interface builds something that looks more like a paper form. It's not a native interface, whereas Xojo uses all native controls. So you're getting a native user interface. And I even have this little maintenance button because this is supposed to be kind of a customer invoicing products app as an example. And so these are tables, for that you just need for maintenance. Here's all the states. Here's the names of the reps, and there's this is called a editing button in DBKit. And so, for example, if I want to edit, I just this button gives you all of this functionality. So I just click edit, and I can change this, for example, from Sam to Samuel, delete, whatever. So DBKit does a lot of the work for you. And if we go back and look, you can see if I scroll through here, here's the customer's window, here's all the controls. And if there was code behind these, like for example, well, here I was doing some testing here. Let's take that out. Um, these would be disclosable like this. These are just controls, but there's basically no code in here at all, not one line of code. Now, speaking of code though, let's say you wanted to add some code to do something simple. Um, for example, Xojo is an event-based framework. So when you double click on a control, this is where you add code for handling events. This has a lot of events, this particular control. For example, the opening event is when the layout opens for the first time, right? So if you wanted to initialize the control in some way, that's where you do it. You've got events for things like the selection changing, the text change, like selection changed in the case of a field is when the user highlights text. Text change means they're literally changing it, they're typing text, for example. Um, you have drag events, mouse up and mouse down. Typically, you don't use those with this, but they're there if you need them. And then for DBKit, I've added some, like there's a loading row event, which tells you that a row is being loaded. There's a saving row event, so you know that they're saving. So for example, here, let's do this. I'm going to go to the pop-up menu, and well, let's see. Let's do this is last name. Here, let's try this one. So what I want to do is pop up a message box if the user's last name is Norman. So because that's a customer I use a lot in here for testing. So I'm going to put if me.text equals Norman, then message box, hello Norman. Something very, very simple. End if. So me refers to this control. It's just a generic way of referring to the control. So if me.text, if the text of the control is Norman, then message box and hello Norman. Okay, so let's run. And we'll go to customers. And let me find Norman here. Actually, I'll just search. There. Okay. So I'll click. The loading event fired, and there's the message. So that's just a simple example of a little bit of code that you can write. Again, there's lots of events. Different controls have different events, like a push button has a pressed event. And whenever you double click on a control, it'll default to selecting the most commonly used event, like selection change. When the user changes their selection in the pop-up menu, that's going to be really common for a pop-up menu. So that's an example. Okay, so that's a very quick demonstration of DBKit. This version of DBKit again is in development. I'm imagining it'll be out within the next month. Um, and there's a web version of DBKit as well. There is a version of DBKit that is available in Xojo now, and there's documentation about it in our docs, and there's even a tutorial. So you can get started with that version, but this version is even easier to use and does a lot more. So just know that if you look into the existing version of DBKit. Okay. Now, if you're going to port an existing FileMaker application to Xojo, you'll need to recreate your forms. The good news is, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, that's going to be so much work. I mean, so many forms. Well, the good news is you've already actually done the hard work. The hard work is really deciding how to lay them out, like where you want things and what columns you need and what's going to be a pop-up menu and what's going to be a checkbox and all that stuff. So chances are the way you've laid out your existing forms probably will work just fine in Xojo. So you'll still have to recreate them, by dragging and dropping, but that's the easy part, honestly. I've played around actually with using AI to convert forms, and I've had some success with that. So, and of course, AI is getting better and better all the time. So, in my case, I just took a screenshot of a form and then asked a large language model to turn it into a Xojo form. It was pretty good. It wasn't perfect, but it was pretty good. Specifically with FileMaker. I've had more success with layouts from other tools, but and I only had a limited number of FileMaker layouts to try. So I'd encourage you to try taking a screen snapshot of your layout and see if you can get a large language model to an AI engine to recreate it for you. Same with code. I would give that a try. I haven't tested it with FileMaker scripts, but I've tested it with other languages, and I've been really surprised at how good AI is getting at converting code from one language into another language. It's pretty impressive. So that's something to look at. But again, with your scripting, you already worked out the order that things should happen, the conditions, all of that, and that's the hard part. Rewriting it, even if you had to in Xojo, since you already know what it's supposed to do and what order things are going to happen, that's you're halfway there already doing that. Reporting. So we have a report engine in Xojo, which you can use. We also have a charting tool for doing charts, and we have great support for PDF. So if you want to automate the process of generating PDFs, in fact, you could build a report completely, programmatically, generate a PDF, fill it in with whatever information you want, and then have it, email it to somebody because we have email classes built in as well, or upload it to a server because we have classes that will help you with that. So if you can imagine how you want it to work, you can probably make it work that way in Xojo. FileMaker is powerful, but it's still more limited than Xojo is. So you get used to working within the confines of whatever tool you have, and Xojo is much more broad, much more open than that. So keep that in mind. Debugging. So Xojo has a debugger. I'm going to give you a quick little demo of that. Let's go back to our layout, and that was this one. There we go. Okay, so this is the code editor, and you'll see there's these little lines here over on the left-hand side, and I'm just going to click on one of those lines, and that puts a breakpoint. What that says is, hey, when you get to this spot, stop. So I'm going to press run. Okay, and let's bring up, oh, right away. Okay, there we are. So it was before we even saw the interface, that code's already running because it's loading the row. And now I can use these controls just above here to step through the code one line at a time. I can step over this line. I can, if this was calling another method, I can step into it. I can step back out again, etc. But mostly you just step. Um, it's loading the very first row, which isn't Norman, so it's not going to go in here and display the message box. But anyway, that gives you an idea. Over here, you've got a list of various variables that are available. This is the text field itself. There's me, so that's the text field we're on. Here's the row set that's got all the rows in it. In fact, if I click on row set, I can then click on contents, and there's the row. Um, and then here's the window. So I can see all of the different properties of the window if I need to see them, the size, shape, the where it is on the screen, etc. And then this is all the methods in DBKit. You don't really care because you're not going to deal with any of that, but these are all the methods of DBKit it went through to get to this point. So DBKit does a lot, but again, you don't have to worry about all that stuff. But it does let you navigate. So for example, if I want to go back, I can see the line of code in a previous method that was called. But like I said, this is all DBKit code. You're not going to have to deal with this at all. But that's very briefly a look at the debugger. It's very powerful. It's helpful to just step through your code and see what's going on one line at a time. You're going to start off with really, really simple stuff and just kind of work your way along. The debugger is really, really handy. Okay, that's a quick tour of debugging. Now, building an app. So how do you build your final app? How does that work? Well, again, let's go back into a demo. Okay, so you'll notice in your app, actually, let's go back to the demo app so it's smaller. Okay, so here we've got our app, we got our window, and you'll notice over here on the left, this is what we call the navigator. It's what you use to navigate your project. There's a section called Build Settings, and this is where you set things up, uh, for your built app. Shared is all the stuff that's shared amongst, and this is a desktop app, so amongst Mac, Windows, and Linux, the version number of your app, um, the copyright, if you're gonna have a copyright. There's some things, like optimization used for dark mode, which we support dark mode really well, etc. And then you have platform specific settings. So for Mac OS, the name of the app, you can give it whatever name you want. Do you want it to be a universal app, ARM only or x86 only? You can choose that. Is there a minimum version of Mac OS you want it to support, etc. There's even stuff for the Mac App Store. If you want to publish your app to the Mac App Store, you can see that we have a publish button right here for doing that. For Windows, same thing. There's fewer settings, but you got the Windows app name, your company information, if you want it to be an MDI app or not. And again, architecture, 64-bit, 32-bit, or ARM 64. And for Linux, same thing. You got some settings, including the architecture. And then this computer is just whatever OS you're currently on. And I'm on a Mac, so this is showing me the same as the Mac settings. So once you've set everything up the way you want it, then honestly, and I haven't touched any of those settings, so honestly, all you really have to do is click Build. I click Build, and it's going to go through and compile the app. If it ran into any problems, it would give me a pane down here at the bottom with errors. But it didn't. So there it is. It's gone to the Finder, and there's my app. I can double click it. And this is just macOS security stuff. So you just do that once, and there's the app, and it's working. So um, it's that simple. And then you can distribute the app to whoever, you can, through the App Store or put it on a server, email it, however you want to distribute your apps. You can do that. These are our native apps. In fact, if you've ever done this before, you can right click, show package contents, and you can see that it is in fact an app package behind the scenes. Not that you ever have to deal with this. So building is really as easy as setting some settings and clicking build. That's basically it. Okay, next steps. What would you do next? Um, well, first of all, download Xojo. It's free. You only pay for a license when you want to build. So you can explore Xojo, learn it, everything without spending a penny. When you are far enough along that you want to start being able to distribute your applications, that's when you buy a license. I'd suggest doing some quick starts and tutorials. That's always a good idea. And if you do a quick start on one project type, like say desktop, go ahead and do the same quick start for one or both of the other types. Because it's really good to see when you do one for like desktop and then you do the web one, you'll see, wow, this is so similar. It's nearly the same process for creating a web app as it is for a desktop app. Now, obviously, there's little differences. There are things that make sense on the web that don't make sense on desktop, and vice versa. Same with mobile. But you'll find that the overwhelming majority of the process of creating an app is basically the same. Maybe visit our forum. We have a lot of users on the forum that are happy to share their experience and answer your questions. It's a very friendly place. Don't worry about asking beginner level questions. There's plenty of beginners. And like I said before, pick a small project to get started. Check out DBKit. It's one of the built-in examples. Again, remember that the version that's there is not the version I showed you today. It's very similar in how it works, but the new version's even easier. So, and I'm working hard to get that out as soon as I can. And we have a creating Android apps for FileMaker webinar that Tim did. It's on YouTube, so you'll want to go check that out as well. And by the way, I will update the video so that afterwards so that the section where I did the demo, I'll find out what went wrong with the demo, and I'll fix that, and I'll alter the video so that you can watch it again and see the whole demonstration of DBKit. I apologize for that. I'm not sure what went wrong there. Okay, questions. So let me get over to let's see. Oh, hang on. I need to show all. And I'm going to bring up the questions pane 1 second. Okay. Well, so far we just have one question. Like, wow, was I that thorough? So Alan is asking, can Xojo handle FileMaker container fields? Now, I'm going to ask Tim to answer this question because I don't know what a container field is in FileMaker. That clearly came along after I was done using FileMaker. So Tim, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so I'll explain what a container field is and I'll let you answer the question. How about that?
Okay.
So in FileMaker, a container field is something that you can use to sort of store like a binary, like a photo or what have you.
Ah,
A PDF, for example, that's often like what people use it for. And then depending on what is in the container, you can choose how it's actually displayed.
okay, so yes, the answer is yes, it can. There are many different ways to do this. If it's a picture, we have an image viewer control. So that's designed to display pictures. In fact, when I showed you the DBKit and you saw the picture of the customer, that's an image viewer control. We also have a control called a canvas control. Now, a canvas control, think of it as just a blank area. In fact, it's transparent usually, and you draw into it. So you could tell it to display a picture in there as well if you didn't want a frame around the picture, if you just wanted the image by itself. The canvas control also gives you the ability to draw virtually anything you want. So you could draw on top of the picture, you could draw something else entirely, but that's another way. And then for PDFs or for really anything that a browser can display, we have an HTML viewer control. And just think of it like a web browser that you can put in the middle of your application. So it's just an area, you give it a URL. It can have a file URL if you want to display like a PDF file, but it can also be a URL from anywhere on the internet or your local network. It's just a browser that you can stick in just the content region right into the middle of your layout. So lots of options for containers depending on what kind of information it is. I should add that we also have what we call a container control. A container control is think about it as a layout that you can put inside your layout. In fact, I'm going to give you a quick demo so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm going to add a container. So I'm going to go to the insert menu and choose container. And it's just a layout like any other kind of layout. So I'm going to just make something really, really simple. Let's add a field and a button. Now this could obviously be any size. I can make this, I can make this, any size I want, but I'm going to make it something really small. Okay, now I can go back to my window and here's my container. You can call it whatever you want. By default, it's called container one. And I can just drag that out and there it is. And I can even duplicate this. So I can have as many of these as I want. So it's a layout within a layout. Think of it that way. And this is a really handy way to create functionality that you need to use, repeatedly throughout your application without having to redo it. You just do it one time, add your code or arrange your fields, whatever, and then you've got it. So that's a container control. All right, let me go back to questions. Oh, we've got a couple more. That's good to see. Okay. Oliver's asking about compatibility with update backslash upgrade on iOS and Android okay. I'm not sure what Oliver's asking exactly. I think he's asking if you can update a database, not just read data out of a database for iOS and Android. And the answer is yes. For SQLite, you just use our normal access for SQLite. when you're on mobile and you're accessing a server, um, that you have to go through a REST API like Tim mentioned earlier, where you use our URL connection and use URLs to get the fetch the data and go back and forth. I am working on a solution to that, but in the meantime, that's what you have to do. And the reason for that is that's a limitation of mobile operating systems. Mobile applications cannot connect to a server and stay connected because that connection uses up a lot of battery. So what happens is that if a connection stays too long, the mobile operating system, whether it's Android or iOS, will just cut it off. It'll just completely cut off the connection. So what happens is in mobile apps, it connects and does an operation and then disconnects. Like when you're using Amazon on your mobile phone, you log in and that makes a connection, but then it immediately disconnects from the server. And then you type in something locally on your phone that you want to search for, and it then connects, does the search, gets the result back, displays it on the screen. So it's this asynchronous operation, and that's how it can feel like you're staying connected the whole time when in fact you actually are not. So, but I've actually got a solution that I'm working on, so stay tuned for that, where you can it'll treat it like it's just a normal connection, but it's actually asynchronous in the background so that you can do things the way you're used to doing them and not have to monkey around with all the limitations of mobile. That's something coming down the road. Marcus has got a question. In FileMaker, we also use container fields for files we want to import. For example, drop a comma, a CVS file, comma, I can't remember what that stands for. What's the S stand for, Tim?
Comma separated.
Separated, yes. Comma separated value file to import into a table. Is that possible? Um, well, okay. I guess I'm not sh if you wanted to make it so you could drop a file in, we have drag and drop events, Marcus. So for example, let's say you wanted the user just to be able to drop it on the window. You would just go to the drop event and you would be able to detect what file just got dropped, and then you could open the file and read it and create records in the database. That's not very difficult to do. In fact, our file, especially with text files, the code to open a text file and read it is really simple. You can find lots of examples of that. It's really, really simple.
Hey, Jeff, if you do have a second, if you jump back over to Xojo and create a new project, there's an example project called Drag and Drop, and it's exactly what you're describing.
Dragging and dropping files.
Yep.
Yeah, this is probably it. Yeah, okay. So this is, yeah, let's run this. Okay, drag and drop. All right, so I'm gonna go grab, 1 second, I'm gonna grab a file. Here, let's grab this file. Let's see what it does with this. Okay, well, it's showing you, there's the file. So, oh, double click to open it. Okay, so I'm gonna double click. Yeah, and there's the file. Okay, so yes, so you can explore this example, and then there's also boys, there's examples for everything. I can go to new project, and I can go to files, and here, oh, that's drag to desktop. That's the opposite direction, but let's try that. Okay, and I'm gonna hide others, and drag in the window and click on the desktop. This will create a file. Okay. Oh, see that? There's the drag item. So I'll drop it, and there's the file. Oops. Yeah. Well, there it is. Anyway, so there's examples for really for everything. If you can imagine it, I mean, there's 300 and something examples. And by the way, when you go to uh, the new project dialog box, you see the search up here. You don't have to go through, the hierarchy. I mean, there is one, there's PDF examples and there's printing examples and there's database examples. But if you just want to search for a keyword like file, this will search through all of them and show you where they are. So there's just a ton. I mean, of you name it, there's probably an example for it. Adding links to PDF files, for example, downloading files, all kinds of stuff. Okay. All right. I guess that's it. I want to thank you so much for coming. If you have further questions, get on the forum or email us. Like I said, I will get the video of this up on YouTube either later today or tomorrow. So look for that. It'll just be migrating from FileMaker to Xojo. If you just search for that, that should find it. And we do these webinars about once a month. If you download Xojo, you'll be creating an account on our server, so you can indicate if you want to get our newsletter, and we'll announce upcoming webinars in the newsletter. They're always fun. And yeah, again, thank you so much. And until next time, enjoy Xojo. Bye bye.